On my birthday, I disappeared without telling anyone. At first, nobody cared. They just thought I was throwing a tantrum and would be back soon. But 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, then a month passed, and I never showed up again. I thought I could just live quietly by myself. It wasn't until a teacher called home that the Chu family realized I hadn't been back in a long time. My dad, Chu Dahai, was furious. So what if I didn't buy him a cake? Is that a reason to run away? Does he not even have the money to buy his own cake? My mom, Lin Shui, sighed. He's so immature, taking the family's money and who knows what he spent it on. She then asked Chu Dahai, how much allowance do you give him every month? I really want to ask him why he couldn't buy his own cake. Chu Dahai looked confused. He's so badly behaved, why would I give him an allowance? Even if I didn't, the allowance you give him should be more than enough, right? Lin Shui froze. I didn't give him an allowance either. Before they could finish, they looked at each other and asked at the same time, you never gave him an allowance? They couldn't believe it. They gave their younger brother Xiaofei tens of thousands in allowance every month. Plus what his 3 sisters gave him from time to time, he never had to worry about money. On holidays and birthdays, they gave him even more. But it seemed they had never actually given me a dime. Chu Dahai called the maid over and asked, where's Chu Zihao's room? The maid was a bit shocked. This family didn't even know where their own biological son's room was. But as the Chu family maid, she knew better than to ask questions. She respectfully led the way. Sir, ma'am, young ladies, please follow me. The maid navigated through a bunch of rooms and finally stopped at a tiny storage room in the corner. Sir, ma'am, young ladies, this is Master Zihao's room. As they looked on in confusion, the maid opened the door, and the tiny room was completely exposed. They stared in shock at the pitifully small room. There was even a sign on the door that said, storage room. Zihao, how could he live here? Lin Shui said in disbelief. Chu Dahai frowned deeply and asked the maid angrily, what's going on? Why is Zihao living in the storage room? The maid sighed inwardly and told the truth. Sir, Master Zihao moved into this storage room when he was 8 years old. He's been living in this storage room for 8 years. Honestly, this tiny storage room was even smaller than her own maid's quarters, and the things inside were pitifully scarce. As the real young master of a wealthy family, he lived in such a tiny room. Meanwhile, the adopted young master lived in his big room, spent the money that should have been his, and enjoyed the whole family's love. The maid felt sorry for him, but her words carried no weight, and the master and man were so stubborn, there was nothing she could do. Lin Shui and Chu Dahai looked at each other in shock. They remembered that when he was 8, they adopted Chu Fei. Chu Fei wanted Zihao's big room. At the time, they planned to set up another big room for him, but he kept making mistakes, so to teach him a lesson, they put it on hold. And that hold lasted for 8 solid years. A flash of guilt crossed Lin Shui and Chu Dahai's eyes. Zihao was their biological son, yet he lived in such a small storage room in the Chu family home for 8 years. They had truly failed him. They slowly walked into the room, and everything inside was completely different from what they imagined. The room was tiny. Besides a small bed, there was only a basic wardrobe, a small table, and a small stool. The blanket on the bed was really thin too. It's hard to imagine how he survived the winters. With 5 people standing in the room, it felt unbelievably cramped. The 3 sisters were genuinely shocked seeing this. Their rooms and Chu Fei's were incredibly spacious, with great lighting, and everything was custom designed by top designers. As children of the Chu family, they couldn't even fathom that I was living in such a cramped and depressing storage room. There was a bank card on the table. Lin Shui instantly recognized it as the birthday present she gave him when he was little. He didn't even take this bank card with him? He left the card behind. Is Chu Zihao planning to starve out there? Chu Shiwei said annoyedly. I mean, sure, you can link a card to your phone, but this card is under Mom's name. They all have one. Leaving it at home? Isn't he worried Mom will cancel it? With a trembling hand, Lin Shu picked up the card. She quickly opened her phone to check the transaction history. The rest of the Chu family obviously sensed something, and quickly gathered around to look. Lin Shui opened the account that hadn't been checked in 8 years. What appeared on the phone screen next left everyone completely stunned. Aside from the 200,000 Lin Shui transferred, the account was totally empty. There hadn't been a single transaction in 8 years. The last purchase on this card was 6 years ago, and the last deposit was 8 years ago, which meant that 6 years ago, when I was 10, I stopped using this card completely. Chu Dahai's voice cracked. When was the last time you gave Zihao cash? The room fell dead silent. After a long pause, Lin Shui replied, it was 8 years ago. The 3 Chu sisters were also shocked to their core. In unison, they said, us too. Then, how has he been surviving? Chu Junlin muttered in disbelief. At that moment, the maid standing nearby couldn't hold it back anymore. She had been working for the Chu family for over 20 years. She had been there since before the eldest daughter was even born. She quickly said, Sir, ma'am, ever since you adopted the young master, Master Zihao would spend most of his time in this storage room. He always made you angry, so he never got enough to eat and went hungry. The first 2 years were okay. Master Zihao would buy some bread or stuff himself, but eventually his money ran out. After he went hungry for a while, I went out grocery shopping one day and saw him washing dishes at a restaurant outside. How is that possible? Chu Junlin yelled in disbelief. The maid nodded. Master Zihao was still little back then, so he couldn't make much money. I used to sneak him bread all the time. Later, as Master Zihao grew older, he could make his own money to buy bread. The whole family was dumbfounded. It was true, because whenever I was at home, I was always causing some kind of trouble. I only ever dared to eat the food right in front of me. After being scolded or beaten, it seemed I really didn't eat much at all. They never imagined he was so hungry that he had to go get a part-time job just to survive.